Hello everyone and welcome to the webinar CTSO TSMO Roundtable, TSMO Project Selection and Prioritization Best Practices. My name is Nilo Parinashiani and I'll be helping with the facilitation of today's webinar. This webinar is sponsored by the AASHTO Committee on Transportation System Operations and is hosted by the National Operations Center of Excellence, also known as NOCoE. So a quick reminder, if you don't know us already, you can use that useful links box that you see on your screen right now to browse through NOCoE resources and also a newsletter for any TSMO resource and industry news. Below that is the download pod where you can access the PDF of the slides from today's presentation. This will be shown now when we're doing the intro, and then at the end we'll show this again for Q&A. So quickly, I'll cover a few logistics. This webinar is being recorded, and that recording along with the presentation slides will be also available through the on-demand learning section of NOCoE website. All the attendee phones are on listen-only mode by default, but please stay engaged by using the question discussion pod that you're seeing for any comments or any questions during the webinar. As those questions come to your mind during each presentation, please just type them in that pod, and then at the end of the webinar, we have dedicated time to do Q&A and discussion. So each of your questions will be read out loud by the moderator, and the presenters will answer questions. So that's all I had, and with that, I'll hand it over to our moderators, Brad Fries and Monica Harwood, to start us off. Brad?
Thank you, Nilu. If we can bring up our intro presentation slides here. Here it comes. So thanks for joining us this morning or afternoon, depending on where you're located. I appreciate you being on the call. Today, this, as Nilu said, this is a partnership between the AASHTO Committee on Transportation Systems Operations and National Operations Center of Excellence. As far as hosting this and facilitating these webinars, we call it a roundtable because we want discussion. We want to have active engagement on these topics. And starting out, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. I guess let me introduce myself. My name is Brad Fries. I work with the Tennessee Department of Transportation, where I'm the director of the Traffic Operations Division. And with this effort, I help out with and work with AASHTO, CTSO, and the National Operations Center of Excellence. So a little bit of background. So the AASHTO Subcommittee on Operations, which is a subcommittee of CTSO, has identified holding one or more TSMO roundtables as one of its priorities for 2020. This was back last year. We identified this as priority action items. The intent is really to focus on bread and butter TSMO topics that will be fed by the CTSO membership. It is envisioned that these webinars will become a reoccurring opportunity for sharing best practices and facilitating discussion that supports the furtherance of TSMO. So, I mean, we're calling it a roundtable because we want to, share some best practices, but we also want to encourage a lot of engagement and discussion. This is actually kind of a revitalization of previous roundtables that have been hosted through NOCoE and in partnership with FHWA. So we really started a process like this beginning in 2016 with AASHTO and National Operations Center of Excellence and FHWA. We collaborated on a series of virtual webinars, and they were really focused on best practices on TSMO program planning. And you see here on this slide, those objectives of those were really to identify peer agencies that had developed TSMO program plans or integrated TSMO program plan elements into their existing plans and procedures, and to identify common issues encountered and their potential remedies to TSMO program plans to help mainstream TSMO in an agency. So this is really building upon that foundation and that start back in 2016. This next slide shows really a timeline of those webinars that you see here. Actually, these are hot linked right here where you actually go out there and still find the content back in December 13th, 2016 when we had the first one, and then the second roundtable in December of 2017 where we had additional presentations. Actually, it was a two-part roundtable where we talked more about TSMO program planning. And then round 3, we had some, in 2018, we had some additional observations on TSMO program planning. And then additionally, there have been previous webinars on TSMO program planning hosted by the National Operations Center of Excellence. But like I said, this is a little bit of a revitalization of those the roundtable format that CTSO highlighted as an action items, as making sure we have an opportunity to come together and share best practices, but also have discussion. Some of the best opportunities I've had are when we actually have the annual CTSO member meeting when we go around and do a big roundtable. This is really meant to try to capture some of that process and that discussion. So next, I'll turn it over to Monica Harwood with the Washington State DOT.
Thanks, Brad, and good morning, good afternoon from the great state of Washington. My name is Monica Harwood Duncan, and I am Washington State DOT's statewide TSMO development engineer, and I'm very honored to be here this morning. These roundtable webinars are great opportunities to dive in deep on some very specific topics, and so I already know you're going to love today's presentations and topic, and so I'm going to tell you that not only is today available, but there's going to be a follow-up one. And so we're going to be talking today about TSMO's project selection and prioritization best practices, and there's another one coming up next month that you're going to want to register and tune in for. So, and that one's going to be on best practice for TSMO training programs at all the levels of workforce. So be rest assured that there's more on the agenda for you to enjoy. So to kind of cue up today's discussion, if you want to switch the agenda. Next, yeah, there we go. So we've got an agenda set today, but I want to talk a little bit about why we've gathered a great set of panelists here and what they're going to be talking about. So when you think about TSMO and our programs, and you know, we're not standalones in our agencies. We have colleagues that are in other programs such as preservation or capital expansion or other ones. TSMO is relatively new to our agencies, and I don't mean to say that we haven't been around a while, but when you look at the history of DOTs, we are relatively new, and that's on all things. That's culture, that's performance management, that's all those things. But in particular to business processes, we are new to the project selection and prioritization process. And compared to the other programs, like for traditional projects, the processes are very, very deeply rooted. We are trying to navigate how to institutionalize TSMO, and obviously that's in project selection and prioritization. And so when you think about what challenges us, what's unique to TSMO, besides being new, there's some other things we have to think about, like awareness of overall strategies. Do people even know what TSMO is and what the various strategies are? Do they know what the benefits of TSMO are? Can they analyze and quantify it? Do we have a culture that has shifted away from our traditional, capital or roadway expanding projects? And technology, it's just like, how do we program? How do we select technology if that's part of a thing? And so I think as we try to answer those questions, it only leads to more questions. And so here's some of the questions that I myself find myself asking in Washington State of myself and my colleagues. And it's like, when we're doing corridor planning and management, how do we know when we've achieved the right set of TSMO strategies, or how do we develop guidance to planners and designers to lead to that right set? And when your agency is leading the charge, what does a project prioritization look like, and how well is it accepted? And so, those are big, big questions. And I know sometimes, I don't know about you, but for me, when I talk to my colleagues, I get very jealous because they have these very institutionalized programs. You think about a pavement analysis program or a safety risk analysis and countermeasure benefits, or the benefit cost calculation of adding a new lane. Those are those are like secondhand for our designers or our planners to do, but analyzing TSMO is very difficult at this point. And so here's the thing. These are difficult things, and they are challenges, but are they opportunities? Absolutely, they're opportunities, and they're obviously an opportunity and a window for us to influence. And so to help us all with this guidance, we have some great examples today of states that are leading this, and TSMO champions who are pioneering and doing this. So I'll stop talking and let them start talking. And so to get us started, we wanted to kind of set the national context. And so while I introduce Tracy, if you wouldn't mind bringing up her slides. We have from SHWA, we have Tracy Scriba. She is a team leader for the planning and organizing operations team at SHWA. They focus on advancing and mainstreaming TSMO through all the different CMM capabilities, like organizational capabilities, culture, but in particular for today's topic, planning and programming. Tracy received a systems engineering degree from the University of Virginia. Go Cavaliers. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you, Monica and Brad, for organizing this webinar today. I think it's a very interesting topic, and I myself am looking forward to hearing all the speakers we have on the panel today. So I'm kicking it off with a project that we're just getting started with at Federal Highway headquarters in collaboration with our partners, particularly in our resource center. And that is a TSMO Strategy Toolkit. And to give you a little bit of the background as to why we're looking at this project, I guess Monica teed this up perfectly. And that is the question that as TSMO has been getting more attention paid to it and has been advancing in recent years in a lot of agencies, really looking at how to develop more of a TSMO program, we've been hearing more questions about how do I know which TSMO strategies to choose? There's a lot of good information out there about individual strategies, but how do I know which ones to choose for a given situation, which ones we maybe want to use more extensively in our program? So we thought, well, we looked at a lot of the resources that have been developed, and there are a lot of great, as I said, information on individual strategies that can be applied. And yet we really didn't have a lot of resources that in Federal Highway that kind of tried to take the bigger picture look at combining strategies, at selecting between strategies, and that sort of thing. So the idea with this project is to really create a toolkit that can help practitioners, first of all, identify the range of TSMO strategies, because it is quite large. Identify, which ones might be most useful in a given situation or for a particular issue. And it's usually probably not one strategy, but there may be a short list of strategies that might be most applicable. And then help practitioners connect with the resources that would help them apply those strategies maybe more smartly or more effectively. And it sounds simple on the one hand. On the other hand, because there are so many site-specific considerations, there are so many different strategies, what to pick is not a simple task. And so there's a number of aspects to this project that will look at what are the needs out there among practitioners and what are the gaps in what already exists and what the needs are. How do we even categorize strategies? And even from looking at that a little bit to date, before now, there is probably not one right answer to that. Depending on what perspective you take, you might categorize them a bit differently. So I think that's going to be an interesting discussion about how best to do it for this toolkit, and maybe we end up doing it in more ways than one. And then how do you leverage the existing resources that are out there to help make these kinds of decisions? So as TSMO has been advancing in recent years, there are a number of resources that have started to be developed by different parties. Monica in Washington State is one of those places that's really kind of tried to attack this issue and figure out how to make it more usable and make information more accessible to practitioners. So there's some resources that Washington State DOT has developed that we'll be looking at as part of this project. And there are some resources such as strategy descriptions that TTI has developed. that we'll consider, and a few other kinds of resources out there so that we're not making duplication of effort. So we do plan to, at a minimum, produce a strategy matrix in the toolkit, trying to kind of pull the different strategies together and what are some key characteristics and considerations for different strategies. Develop short fact sheets on a wide range of strategies, making use of some of the existing information, but trying to come up with these short 1 to 2 page fact sheets that capture kind of the key things to think about with a given strategy. And what are some tips for kind of how to go about addressing this? We'll be looking at also whether there is a benefit to having an electronic tool to help with this rather than just a matrix, kind of making an electronic tool. That'll be part of the user needs assessment and as we go through the project. One aspect we do also plan to include in this project is to pilot the toolkit. So as we develop the toolkit, a draft toolkit, working with a couple of agencies to pilot it and see, is it useful? How useful is it? Do we need to make some changes to it to make it more useful? So that'll be a key element to the project as well. So we have just kicked it off in the past month or so, and we expect it'll be, probably a 1.5 to 2 year project overall. So that's kind of our general timeline when we would expect to get some results out from this. And I will say, our first task really is to refine the needs definition and to inventory what currently exists. And I consider that to be the key step to the whole project, is to make sure that what we're developing is something that would be useful to practitioners and to key audiences out there. And we are looking at how to segment those audiences and figure out how to, there may be different needs depending on where someone is in, for example, the project development process. Are they in the operations end of things? Are they say in design? Are they in planning? Depending on what area they might be involved in, they may have some somewhat different needs. So we'll certainly be having that kind of conversation. So with that, I will turn it over back to Monica to lead us into the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. I know as a state, I'm always so appreciative anytime FHWA and your group are tackling things like that to, one, help collectively gather all the information from states that are leading this and help fill in the gaps. So thank you for continuing to do that. And I'll just remind everybody that that chat box is pretty empty, so feel free to get in there and put some questions in there. If not, you'll be stuck with the preempted questions that Brad and I have thought of, which are super boring. So ask your questions that you want to. So next step to really help us start diving deep into what we all are experiencing out there is Kelly Raboy. She is with the District of Columbia DOT. She's going to be talking about TSMO project evaluation and screening. She serves as their ITS program manager. And her daily work involves planning and designing and implementing technologies and strategies to enhance operations in the DC area. Kelly has an MS in Systems Engineering from the University of Virginia, go Cavaliers again, and a BS in Mathematics and a BA in Economics from the University of Pittsburgh, go Panthers. So Kelly, please take it over.
Thanks, Monica. So I'm Kelly Raboy with the DC Department of Transportation. I'm really happy to be here. So just first of all, talking about how our agency does project selection currently and how TSMO is incorporated into that. So for as long as I've been around, our non-core project funding requests, so those projects without a significant regional impact, have required responses on how ITS is considered or incorporated into our projects. But at the end of the day, the responses to those questions don't actually seem to be considered in the selection process. We do consider questions on, does the project expand options for walking, biking, or transit? Does the project improve a mobility corridor or a high congestion corridor? So that's like almost getting to what TSMO strategies might be, but we're not quite there. Right now, though, there's been a big push for project selection to be tied more directly into our long-range plan and the long-range plan goals, and we're actually currently undergoing an update to our long-range plan. And this time around, which has not really been the case in the past, operations really has a seat at the table to help influence what these long-range plan goals are, as well as the related policies and strategies. So through that, we're able to kind of steer TSMO into being an inherent part of the project selection process. You know, in this update to the long-range plan, strategies that we've identified in the TSMO plan are actually becoming long-range plan strategies as well. And as you can see in the graphic here, our high-level goals include mobility and management and operations. So we're definitely starting to influence this and hoping this is a positive way forward. But finally, I mean, I have to be a little humble here. Being a small state is helpful, right? I mean, there's just less competition for project selection across the board. There's no competition across geographies because we are, you know, a pretty small place. But also, you know, it's just TSMO is a little more visible across the agency. It's easier to collaborate across silos and influence projects just, you know, because we are a small place and we all sort of know each other. So an example of that I can give, we had a big bridge project a few years ago. TSMO was not considered in the process, but we ended up, you know, putting in a change order to add fiber and camera and count stations for traffic management during the process. So that's kind of what things look like across the board, but what I'm really here to talk about today is what I'm hoping is going to be an innovative approach to pilot evaluation and screening. So, you know, what is this, I guess? So what we're looking at is we're trying to build a consistent strategic approach for vetting and implementing emerging technology pilots and demonstrations. As the District of Columbia, as the nation's capital, you know, we're a highly visible place, so we get a lot of requests from vendors, you know, to implement all sorts of emerging technologies. And the problem we really run into is how do we sort through those to make sure that we're investing our resources strategically. We also really believe in the idea of pilots before full-scale implementation, just to help us keep up with the rapid pace of technology change and also to better understand limitations and any additional needs that we might need to take care of as an agency before we really jump in with both feet. So, you know, the need here is we're trying to encourage innovative solutions through strategic partnerships, make sure that there's a single well-defined point of entry for vendors, you know, so they're not hopping around to different staff members. And then make sure that we're, you know, fairly assessing the pitches from vendors that come in, that we're investing adequate resources in the pilots that we want to move forward with, and then also when we don't want to move forward with something to be able to give clear answers to why we're not doing that. So just on a high level, these are the criteria that we're looking at when we're screening these vendors. First of all, does the project advance agency goals? This is based on our long-range plan goals and policies. Secondly, you know, what could the project provide to support our agency goals? So specifically, what kind of data or services are we talking about? I've listed some. This is not exhaustive, but some of the things that we're thinking about in that table below, or table that you see right there on the slide. And then also, what effort is required from us to ensure successful implementation? So is there a monetary contribution needed? Do they need access to our physical assets or data assets? Is there any sort of stakeholder outreach that we need to do? How much of our staff time is required? You know, really getting a good sense of that. And then finally, is the project ready for implementation? So what's the timeline we're looking at? Is the technology mature? Is it scalable? What are the liability considerations? Is there a path for sustainable funding going forward? And do we as DDOT have the authority to implement this and the ability to enforce anything that needs to be enforced? So this is what the process looks like. These are the four major components. So first of all, we have a strategic framework that describes the overall need and approach to pilot evaluation and screening. We have a common application for vendors online. This publicly launched in November of 2019. And the application includes questions related to most of the criteria that I described in the previous slide. We also have a two-tiered evaluation panels, and they include internal stakeholders from across the agency, everything from asset managers, data recipients, folks who do service oversight, policy, research, IT. The first tier of these evaluations are just looking at, is this technology the right fit for our agency? Is it ready for implementation? And then it gets passed on to the second tier of evaluation where we're looking a little more in depth, does it fit our goals? What kind of effort is required from us? Is it the right fit? Is it ready for implementation? And then finally, do we have somebody in the agency who's willing to champion this as a project? At that point, it moves on to whoever the identified project champion is, and then we're building up standard operating procedures around how you approach pitches from vendors, procurement, and implementation, just to kind of help the project champion, get this out on the street. Where we're at so far, we've gotten 25 submissions from vendors to date. All have gone through this process, and then we have DDOT project champions who are moving forward with pitches from 8 of these submissions. And then just finally, this is sort of a complementary process that we have going on right now. So we're moving forward with these sandboxes. So what is a sandbox? We're looking at one intersection or corridor where we have multiple emerging technology vendors in a singular domain of focus. I'll explain what I mean by that in a second, who are doing concurrent demonstration and evaluation. Why do we want multiple vendors in the same space? The idea here is that we can quickly bring them on and then assess the technology without doing a bunch of one-off pilots. And the idea here is that this is a parallel and complementary process to the pilot evaluation and screening process. If we get a lot of submissions that are kind of in the same domain focus area, then we can just do one big pilot rather than, or one big sandbox rather than, separate pilots. In order to kind of get around the slow pace of procurement, we're bringing on consultants where it's the consultant's role to do vendor outreach, vendor awards to vendors, just a small monetary contribution to kind of help them get off the ground, helps facilitate any sort of physical installation or data that's needed, and then also assesses the performance of these vendor technology solutions. So our first domain of focus that we're looking at is pedestrian and cyclist safety in intersections, and right now we're in the process of finalizing the award to the consultant who's going to support that process. So yeah, that's about all I have, but I'm very open to questions when we get to them at the end. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Kelly. And we actually, we're doing great on time, and there's a couple that maybe it makes sense to just answer right now while your presentation is fresh in people's minds. So if you don't mind, the first one is, for your single point of entry regarding vendors, how effective is that regarding the top-down infrastructure? Kelly, if you're answering, you might be on mute.
Yep, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so I'm assuming what we're talking about here is, our vendors actually going through this process or trying to go around it. Initially we really tried to get leadership buy-in to make sure that our leadership was on board with this, that it was an agency-wide approach, that everybody's kind of looking at it. We don't always have, there's always things kind of coming in through the cracks, but we try and always redirect it to this process. And that's been fairly successful. I mean, most of the agency is really interested in doing this because it actually decreases the amount of effort that they have to do personally in organizing pitches. So it's been successful, but there is a lot of redirection. There's been times where things get to my plate or a couple of my colleagues' plates where we say, you should really submit this through this process first, and typically we've had success that way, but yeah, there is still a lot of redirection.
Great. And you did good. Usually my best answer is the one that's on mute, but I'm sure your second one was even better, so good job. We have one more quick question for you. It says, where's the discussion of operations, in other words, the people aspect of TSMO?
So, you know, what I would argue is that, you know, our idea here is by going forward with pilots, we're really trying to understand what's going to be required of the people in the agency, you know, what kind of skills, that sort of thing. So that's part of the way we're looking at that. And then, you know, from the perspective of our long-range plan, I think the struggle with that is that it is a lot more externally focused than internally. So, you know, how do we make sure that those internal considerations of things like workforce development are considered as part of the process, and we're still sort of working that out. You know, we've got a TSMO plan that does consider that, but getting it into this overall project prioritization is a little bit of a stickier question. So I don't think I really have a great response to that, unfortunately.
That's okay. It's okay not to know. We're in a world of figuring things out, so we'll add it to the list. Thank you so much, Kelly. That was awesome. It was a great, really detailed example of how to tackle these things. And I would continue as Kelly's words sink in and questions come up, still continue to add those to the chat box. And I'm going to introduce our next presenter as his presentation is being pulled up. Our next presenter is Jed Falgren. He also is going to talk about, amazingly, TSMO Project Evaluation and Prioritization. He is Minnesota DOT's State TSMO Director. He's a longtime Minnesota employee with a diverse background, and he's now leading all things TSMO, including world domination via TSMO. So he is a graduate of North Dakota State University. Go Bisons. Jed, there you go.
Hey, thank you, Monica. Perfect. Go Bison. Let's go. All right, folks. Absolutely thrilled to be here today, and I guess what the part I love about this is I'm usually taking a lot more out of them than I put into them, but certainly want to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing in Minnesota around TSMO. And I think as Monica touched on early on, TSMO as an organization piece, holistic, is probably pretty new, but many of the aspects have been around for years, and certainly it is that case in Minnesota where much of our TSMO activities are deeply embedded in our districts, and that's where the bulk of our decision-making is being done for funding. But I'm going to touch on some of the things that we have done and how we're managing around those, as well as some things we're doing on some specialized funding. But those TSMO investments are, as I mentioned, directly embedded into our districts. Really that metro, the high-volume corridors have been looking at the traditional ITS type things, the traffic management center, RAM metering. Outstate, it's been more about the road weather information systems, and we've kind of broadened our TSMO definition of talking about preventive actions we're doing to take away things such as crashes. So it's more of the unique intersection designs, roundabouts, J-turns, RCWA systems, as well as blowing snow control. If we can keep snow off the roadway, we don't have to worry about a drift causing crashes. So those are generally outstate. But then across the state, you're going to have signals. You'll have intelligent work zones that we're starting to leverage some of the new technologies out there. But it is those districts that primarily determine those investment priorities with some state guidance. And we wanted to kind of more formalize that. So a few years ago, we put together a group led by Ray Starr out of our traffic engineering section to work hard across the state to put together strategic implementation and business plans. I want to touch on those really quickly. I don't read the entire slides. You've got those chance to download and take a look at the detail. But really, what we're trying to do is as we develop that strategic plan is really get a high-level manager influence from across the department within the district engineers, their traffic engineers, both in operational leadership as well as maintenance and other folks. So we got those groups together, worked with the consultants, and really kind of hammered out what are some of the things that we would want to do with TSMO, and how can we develop maybe a more organized approach to many of these things. That led to our implementation plan, where we, through some interviews that were with specific groups and specific throughout the agency, the idea of what are some of the things that should be a part of that. There are a wide number of TSMO strategies. We actually put together 34 specific strategies, and we did a ranking scoring system as we met with each of those districts and work groups to come up with a way of how can we prioritize those. And that was also subject to our management group's overview and a leadership team and working group developed. And so that really gave us the impetus to go forward. Now we know in 34 prioritized things that, you aren't always going to go 1 through 34. In fact, there's a few things we're working on item 20 now, so we can make one work better. Also a situation where one of our strategies, number 34, was to talk about advancing the idea of people working from home, and who needs a TSMO strategy when you have a pandemic show up and sends everybody home very quickly. So maybe that's minor success early on, but then we put together a business plan, and again, that was now we know what we want to do, how can we make that happen? Again, it was another workshop we had with our managers, and decided this is who's going to sit on this leadership team, who's going to work on the working group, and how are we going to make those things happen. And with that, we launched our more formalized TSMO approach, and that's where I was fortunate enough to be plugged into the middle of this large group. And that is our TSMO organization model. As you can see, if you're at the bottom of it, the foundation, which is actually you're deploying and operating TSMO strategies, you'll see that my role in the middle here as TSMO Coordinator does not really touch directly on those. So I get the pleasure and opportunity working with a variety of groups, whether it be some of the folks in our administration, our district functions, our specialty offices throughout the state, and then also looking at, maybe we're working with external organizations like state patrols, counties, and some of those things. So I have the pleasure and the opportunity to sit in a wide variety of meetings. There's never a day that's boring, and that's probably the exciting part about TSMO is there's always something to pick up and always something to work on. But we really feel that the silos that we get work done on are important silos, but we also need to make sure that those windows are open, the crosswalks are built, skyways are built, so we can be having conversations and building across those silos. So that's the exciting part of what we're doing in Minnesota. What I want to do is here touch on a little bit on just 3 different investment programs outside of the routine district projects that drive actually the bulk of our TSMO spending. But here we had a couple of 3 different examples. One is, as I mentioned, the idea of using item number 20 on our list to help make number 1 go better. And this is upgrading our signal controllers and communication. Then we talked a little bit about how we go about updating some ITS infrastructure. And then I want to touch on something similar to what Kelly touched on, which is we have a very similar idea on our Cab challenge. So the first one is updating those signal controllers and communications. Obviously, that helps us to enhance next strategy, which is being able to update our signal timing and coordination. But in this situation, we had a central pool of dedicated funding, and we told the districts, you're interested in it, this is what it's for. Are you interested? What's your level of interest? And those districts that signed up, the first round was only 7 of the 8 districts signed up. After they saw the success happened in round 1, the other district jumped on board. And indeed, we, from a central level, we don't make specific selections. We say, here's your pool of money, and these are the things that we want you to consider. Maybe it's those signals that are a long ways away, so you don't have to send a technician out a couple of hours in a pickup to determine that this is something you could just easily have started from a terminal. Or maybe there's a group of intersections that are close enough that we can bring it back on a single cell line, with the idea that we don't have broadband coverage all over the place, so we wanted to be able to find ways where we can leverage that communication. Or obviously you're looking at traffic signals that may have significant amounts of traffic or that have a pending significant retiming project coming up. Those would be critical pieces of the infrastructure that we would want to have in place. We are currently starting our 4th round of that. We've got about 890 of our approximate 1,300 signals in the state into that, about 75% metro and 25% outstate. The second one we followed a little bit differently, and this is our an annual funding campaign that we launch out there, and these are it's a statewide solicitation and a statewide ranking that is done, and this is to install either DMS, fiber, cameras, etc. We select this based on background or some feedback we got from our districts. Is we used to select them 4 years out in advance. Now we've moved that out to 5. That allows the winners to feed that directly into their 4-year strategic transportation and implementation plan and sort of improvement plan. And so in that situation, we want to make sure that based on our ITS plan that we obviously that their submittal does meet an identified need. It's meeting those planning guidance and warrants. Is it a fit or a complement to that plan? In this situation, we're looking for maybe more proven technologies, and something that we, in the capital world, being a former maintenance engineer myself, I've always pushed back the idea, you can build the capital, but can you operate it and can you maintain it? And then they've also have to have a plan for project delivery. So each of the districts communicate that information to us. There is a ranked scoring process, and let the best projects win as we go through those. The final one that I wanted to touch on today is similar to what you saw in the District of Columbia, and something we're very proud of here in Minnesota, and that's our Cab Challenge. It's a completely different way of project selection, and we have a fantastic consulting community in the state, and obviously I got a kick out of the question that talks about how do you deal with the top-down infrastructure. There's always somebody coming to the commissioner or coming to the governor or coming to whomever to say, hey, I got a great project. And this Cab Challenge is a great way to funnel that into our Cab group led by Kristen White. Her and her team do a fantastic job of set up an initial meeting with a vendor after they've got a proposal, and we're able to actually react to that proposal and talk about how maybe it does or does not fit a direction that the department hopes to go. From there, those groups go back and we'll tweak and take some of the feedback we have provided, and then they'll provide a round 2 proposal. And then from there, based on the quality of the submission, our interest in moving forward, and of course how many dollars are available, we'll go ahead and award those projects. And this has been just a fantastic tool for us to move on some of those areas that may be a little more cutting edge, different technologies maybe that are maybe just require just a little bit extra work early on. And it's certainly been a spot for us that has been very valuable in finding ways to get some of these things done. Obviously, it has a connected automated vehicle primary component to it, but as you're aware, I mean, that's a lot of the stuff we're doing in the world of TSMO can run right alongside with that. So I think that's all I've got today. Appreciate the chance.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jed. Yeah, thank you. We have a couple questions in the chat box for you. I think we're going to just answer one and save some for the end. And I know when I saw your presentation and I saw that TSMO Coordinator noted, I want to have about 400 of those that we develop here at WashDOT if possible. But there's a question kind of regarding that from a fellow Bison. He asked, representing that he's glad that you're representing the TSMO world as a Bison, but he wants to know, does each district have a specific TSMO position, or is it a team function? So kind of looking at that coordinator role, is that an actual position, or is it representing a functionality?
The coordinator role currently at MnDOT is only a statewide position, which is the role that I serve. Obviously, I'm looking for champions that I'm able to connect with in each of the districts, and while we don't necessarily look maybe now that we have a specific position, what we're looking for is specific attributes and different interests. In some situations, you may have, the bulk of the TSMO champions or people who are interested in it usually come out of the traffic group, but you also may find somebody within maintenance or something within project management. And what we want to do is we want to take the best of those that are interested in developing some things, and so maybe they don't specifically advocate at their district level, but maybe they're working across the state in their current position. And the whole intent here is to elevate the idea of a TSMO project, making sure that that comes forward in your, as I mentioned, the most significant part of our TSMO budget is spent just at that capital outlay that's done at each of those individual districts. So we at this time don't have district champions, but
awesome.
Always looking for advocates.
Yeah. And in utopia, we won't even need those positions anymore, right? Because people will already be thinking TSMO, it'll be so ingrained in their head, just like we don't need road expansion champions, right? We've got those.
We still keep those paper
that's the future.
Yep. Thanks.
Exactly. All right. While I introduce our next presenter, Rod, let's go ahead and pull up his slides. So our next awesome presenter is Rod Schilling. He is going to be talking about this topic in context to their TSMO implementation plan. He's from the Nevada DOT, where he serves as the Assistant Chief of Operations. Their team there is working to break down the silos and work together to improve safety, reliability, and the overall efficiency of our transportation system. Rod's a graduate of the University of Nevada, Reno, with a BS in Civil Engineering. Go Wolves. All right, Rod, take it away.
Hey, thank you very much, Monica, and thank you guys all for this opportunity to talk about the great state of Nevada and the things that we're doing with our TSMO implementation plan. So what we're doing, currently, as in 2020, we did effectively put forward our program plan. So we're starting to work with that. And as part of our implementation, what we're doing is, the part of the state of Nevada, we're one of the fastest growing states, obviously. And the funding is really going to be one of the things that we're always having to try to meet. And that's always going to be short. So we can't always simply build our way out of it, just like everybody has dealt with this in their DOTs too. So we got to look at the ways to better make smarter investments and solve some of those transportation problems in the long term. So what we're doing is we're looking at TSMO as that data-driven approach, with a performance-based side to it for all of our project selection. And we want to focus on some of those lower costs, with that high return on our investment to be able to optimize our existing infrastructure. So we're going to take a look at some of those strategies to focus on what matters to the end user. And, a lot of it's going to be with the congestion and the travel time as you start doing that. So with that in mind, what we're doing is we're taking into account all of the strategic goals and objectives within that, and then we want to make sure that they align with our One Nevada Transportation Plan. So we're looking to make sure that we enhance the safety, preserve our infrastructure, optimize that mobility, and foster sustainability. So that's one of them that's kind of a little bit more of a focus on the environmental side, but it's also on how we do our design and our maintenance. And, so Jed was talking about that too. We want to make sure that we look at that maintenance and, the operation of that, and make sure when we implement our project and activities that we can solve some of those issues in the short term and then also in the long term. Okay, so let me go to the next slide there, okay? And then in addition to that, so we're looking at, customer service, enhancing our collaboration, all things TSMO, and then also everything within that to strengthen our TSMO integration throughout the department. So it's not just internal, but we want to make sure that we're looking at it externally as well, and how all of this works, hand in hand, and how we can integrate that throughout, So again, we're going to look at all of the projects, from a top-down approach, make sure that we integrate TSMO and all of the aspects of the project development, from our planning, our design, our construction, and then, of course, our maintenance. And that, takes everybody working together and, with our stakeholders, and to formally adopt, TSMO throughout the department. So some of the things that we've done, and this is back to the targeted funds, I've seen that question earlier. We do have a dedicated set of funds that we've been working with through the department. And currently, we've developed an investment prioritization tool. So we looked at that, and we want to make sure that it still aligns with everything within our TSMO strategic goals and objectives. take into account the cost. What is the implementation time frame associated with that? What are some of your dependencies, your risks and everything associated, and how that would probably limit, your delivery on those. And then also a benefit cost, we talked about that too. And within our investment prioritization, it does take time to look at some of those benefit cost ratios, but so we've implemented it with some basic values, so does it give us a benefit cost ratio for that? And then also the strategic value. And I'll kind of show you an example of what we've done so far. So here, and it's probably a little bit hard to see with this, but what it is, when we look at our investment prioritization, again, like I was saying, we took into account all of the strategic goals and objectives. We've been using this for several years now within our division of traffic, and then how we do that with a strategic deployment plan. So we meet with all of our districts. We go through everything. We gather their needs, and then we look at that, and then we try to evaluate everything based on those strategic goals and objectives and all the other conditions and factors, and give it a rating. And so that way it gives us a great tool, within our own division, within traffic operations, to develop our strategic deployment plan, and then how that also aligns with the overall One Nevada transportation plan, so we can do our project delivery. Currently, we've been given roughly $15 million a year, but as we start to go forward, the department is definitely taking a stronger stance with this TSMO, and we want a better performance-based approach with that, so that we don't have just that dedicated funding. We'll look at every project as we start doing that from the top down, and then start with an evaluation process. So that's our next step, is what we're working on, is our evaluation tool. Within that, we've developed it internally as part of our TSMO program plan, and it takes into consideration, again, all of those strategies and goals that we identified earlier. And we have like two different analyses, when we look at this. So a level 1 and then a level 2, and then basically what steps that down, into a level 2 is just looking at some of the more of the safety criteria. But what it'll help us do is take a bigger project planning level of this, and then hopefully have a formal process to do this, for all of the project selections. And so it's resource intense again, so when we do this, we look at every project and try to get this identified into the STIP as well, just like Jed was talking about, and start evaluating every project, and then it'll generate an automatic summary for us, for each of these types of selection processes. I'll give you an example here, kind of take a look at that. And it's probably a little bit hard to see, but we can provide, our program plan to show everybody, some of the tools that we do. So again, what we do is we take a look at this, and it's kind of a focused effort, to look at the safety side of everything when we look at this analysis. So like I said, for a level 2, to jump into that, it's got to meet certain criteria, So we'll take a look at our speed studies. Is there any safety issues that are meriting a level 2 analysis, or any type of traffic fatalities or serious injuries? And then we'll go through that and evaluate, and again, go back to our strategic goals and objectives to make sure everything aligns. So once we do this, we'll start getting this into all of the projects, and then we can look at that and hopefully get this into more of an objective decision analysis tool, and that way we can start, establishing better funding for all of our projects. And so the ways to do that, too, is part of the whole TSMO operation, too, is to look at, what are some of those strategies? They talked about them earlier, right? So we want to make sure we look at, our incident and emergency management, your coalitions and things that you can do for your quick clearance and safe roads and everything else for the motorists. And, reliable, the road weather information systems that are out there. Nevada's got a lot of inclement weather, and we want to make sure that we continue that, to look at that, whether it's through, the EDC efforts and everything else. But take a look at all of your available strategies. Integrated corridor management. We've just started to dabble into that, where we're using the active traffic management, your lane control. But these are great ways and solutions, so you can get a better return on your investment. Same thing as your advanced traveler information systems. Provide that out there, early activations and warnings to the motorists, get that out there. The multimodal traffic management, I heard that earlier with some of the other DOTs. We're doing the same thing, looking at, different ways, to do some prioritizations and stuff with pedestrian safety improvements and everything. Same thing with the CAV. We're looking at doing some statewide studies to make sure that our infrastructure meets the needs. We have Senate bills that are helping us to do fiber, with the PPP investments, so that we can kind of do some sharing and looking at that. So we did once. You don't have to continue that effort and come back later. It's very costly. Same thing with the freight and commercial, some of the smart truck parking and everything. So, and same thing with the coordinated signals and those types of efforts. So those are some of the ways I think that TSMO is going to help a lot of the DOTs, and I think it's a great thing to do. And with that, I believe that is the last of that. So again, I thank you guys very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Rod. Great presentation. I think we've seen several states kind of working on some of those prioritization tools that you illustrated. I have a question for you. I'm wondering, that prioritization tool, are those funds that are managed within your traffic program, or I guess the root question I'm looking at was, what discussions with Nevada DOT program management took place to develop that, or do they oversee the program? You probably get the question I'm asking, and I'm just wondering how developing these tools, the conversations with the overall agency program management might look like.
It took some time, and a little bit of the change in the culture, so and it's still evolving, so with some of our previous administration, we always had to do some of those ad hoc types of implementations for everything, and they always looked at it as scope creep, correct? So the way we did it is saying, hey, if we can just get some, dedicated funding, for traffic operations, for our projects, and we implemented this project prioritization that helped identify those. So we had a bucket of money that was always dedicated to us, and that helped us out. But now I think, moving forward as we've incorporated our TSMO program plan, we're going to look at it from, every project, not just a bucket of money, and we'll see what it is. Is safety the actual performance metric that we want to do? And we can look at that, and then we can see how we can improve, based on whatever goal and objective we want to meet. So currently, you're right, it's just, here's our bucket of money, but in the long run, I think, same thing as your preservation that's been, historically grounded, we're trying to get it to that level as well.
Sounds like incremental change.
It is. It's huge. We have a director now that's really supportive, and it's helping us get into that performance-based approach. So I see some really good future for us.
Perfect. Well, I expect there will be a few other questions for you, but while people queue those up, we're going to go ahead and move on to our last but not least presenter here, and that is Don Kakowski. He is the director of the Wisconsin Bureau of Traffic Operations. There he leads and directs statewide traffic policy, TMCs, guidance manuals on ITS, incident management, work zone management, safety traffic signals, electrical management, all things awesome that are TSMO. He has an agricultural engineering degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, go Badgers, and a degree in civil and environmental engineering from Marquette University. I had to look this one up. It's the Golden Eagles. Go Golden Eagles. All right, Don, go for it.
Awesome. All right, I should probably start the little differences that Wisconsin has and maybe some other states. One, when we're trying to develop our TSMO strategy or trying to solve our business needs, we use our 3 E's, engineering, education, and enforcement. Our DSP, our State Patrol, and our DMV are tied in with our engineering side, which is what I am. So we try to leverage them as much as possible on our solutions. The other thing is all our maintenance is done through county workforce. So it's just a little unique nuance that we have. Key with that is we look at our business need and business benefit, and then we are trying to figure what the funding source is and what our current process is. Sorry, I'm having a little technical difficulty. All right. Our folks that are dealing with this, when we talk our TSMO in my bureau and the happy smiley faces here, I'll just focus on some of the key ones that'll be of interest, and that is our control room. That's our TMC. We are collated, so that's where that partnership with State Patrol comes most valuable. Our ITS is in another unit. Our work zones, I'll highlight that part of it because there's some unique, cool stuff we're doing with that for our projects. And then, as others have mentioned, to leverage TSMO, we have our ETO, emergency traffic operations, and our safety engineering part of it. When I'm trying to present this not only to the regions when we're trying to develop champions with them, as well as our stakeholders, legislature play a big important part, like for everyone, every fiscal biennial, you get a change. So tying that with new bosses, what is our business need is key. What I tried to assemble is in the business need is this schematic, if you will, of all our different business applications and software and all our ITS needs at different times that we ingest, the massive amounts of data and what we produce that out for. A couple of them that tied into our TSMO that works well with our ITS strategic plan as well as my asset management plan, when they see the connections of how we're doing the crowdsourcing with Waze, and we have that connected to our ATMS and our lane closure system in our 511, those all tie it together a lot with my stakeholders and in the regions for those different businesses that we have. ATMS, as I mentioned, that's fairly new to us that we just did an upgrade on recently. Again, that's the hub that ingests a lot of our ITS data and what we use for our different business needs. A couple new cool things that we've done that help with that TSMO identification is our wrong-way driver system that we have, and the truck parking, like a lot of the Mid-America states are tied into, and the DMS sign messaging. One other cool, unique feature that we have is in that lane closure system. That's a partnership we have with the UW-Madison TOPS lab that helps us give real-time data out to our customers. I added this as part of our strategy when I first started doing the gig about 5 years ago. We found fiber, like a lot of you, going into Cab, going into your ITS system. Fiber, having a good diet of fiber for your ITS network is vital. We got about 1,000 miles. It works valuable to us. Part of the strategy, how we implemented it, most of them, like I'm assuming most of all you tap it to a major project of interest that you have, or we also tied it to a dark fiber negotiation we had with the utilities to get our initial installs with that. Other unique feature of it that we developed and is helping with our fiber is we do partner with universities and municipalities throughout the state. Having that partnership tied into the network not only helps funding our leasing for those fibers, but it also develops a coalition to help support it as we do get new legislators, as I mentioned, ever so often. They want to know what's the business need and what do your partners say about it. So that came in value. I mentioned the work zones and how we tie the work zones into the improvement projects, and as well as the county maintenance work that they are doing for us. As part of the business need, part of the business evaluation, safety for workers, customers, that sells with any legislature, any new bosses coming in, and the savings in our TMP for the projects. But by and large, the safety aspect is the benefit of it. We have some low ITS type fixes like portable rumble strips that we've got great success with that, but the beacons, sensors that we have, the PCMS, both from a smart aero board that the counties can use when they're doing maintenance work out there, as well as our dynamic late merge, which we've gained lots of savings in efficiency of throughput. And again, the business need that we've identified that works the best for everyone is if you're in a work zone, you're 20% more likely to be in a crash. And we were finding about 43% of ours were end of queue, so that's why we focused on the end of queue strategies. Our other business need that works well, you saw it in the schematic that we have, the output in our 511. We did upgrade our 511 so it's more hands-free with the IVR. We ingest a lot of the ITS information we have, but as far as a business need and customer need, on a very good, well, I should say it's a very bad day, usually it's a bad weather event, we get about 125,000 hits on that, and in a year, it's about 3 million hits. So when our legislature, my bosses see that, it really syncs up the need for a low-cost fix that is of benefit to them. Process-wise, for our TSMO, again, we evolved a little bit with, we had a toy process, which just kind of identified you know, where we're going to put ramp gates, where we're going to deploy DMSs. We kind of evolved more into an ITS system that utilizes our current as well as asset management strategies that we developed in the operations world that are unique that we didn't have. Our Meta Manager is our pavement system. By and large, a lot of our SHR funded large mega projects are generated off of that system. I needed to tie into that system to develop hotspots, which is kind of the map you see on the side. You see little lighted hotspots in there. We're able to weave into the scoping process that are used for a lot of projects to tie in, are there lower cost fixes that can be done for those bottlenecks that are more of an ITS strategy or need we can. And so we tied that, as well as there's a new safety certification process which will flag projects or intersection or locations of interest that we can also identify ITS type fixes for that. I mentioned we have a ITS strategic plan, and we have a subset one that we call our Cab roadmap. Those are our strategies where we're looking at the DSRCs, the partnerships with the City of Madison on transit signal priority. We take the entire network that we have and look at a 3-year vision. A lot of the deployments and replacements will look at the life cycle aspect of it. Also with that, I mentioned asset management, having data, making it data-driven is key, like for, I'm sure a lot of folks have in with it. Our asset management system is under development. We're only about 3-4 years old. I'm probably a little farther along in the ITS and in the signal quantifications of that data. I'm developing with our signing and marking aspect of it, but that's going to be the data driver with our current processes in scoping that will help with identifying when we want those replacement cycles and looking at the new technology in the cycle. We have a set-aside funding program. It's a $10 million program. We manage it for 3 years out. These are some of the same parameters that you've seen from all the folks and when you're developing your TSMO for the aspect of it. Key for us is it is fairly new for us, and we want to mimic a lot of our SHR management as far as cost share implementation. Then it's not a new foreign concept to a lot of the folks out in the regions who help us implement it, as well as we use the regions to champion it and to help us develop the priorities for this standalone program. As I mentioned, it's fairly new to us. It had a sunset up until the time I could take all those business needs and identify the value. So our stakeholders in the legislature have since changed the language that was going to sunset and made it more perpetual, the $10 million. It gives us stability in looking at that, and between what we scope in our projects through our user groups with our safety and traffic engineers, as well as the safety traffic engineers helping me manage and prioritize this program, we have gained a lot of stability in our program. I think I threw that in there only when we were talking about ITS and we talk a lot of business needs strategies. I just mentioned it's a lot like the Flintstones meeting the Jetsons. When I was developing region champions, my millennials out there asked me who the Jetsons were, so it's just kind of ironic that what I use for the analogy. And that is it for me.
That's great. Thanks, Don. We've got a couple questions in the chat box for you, so I'm going to ask those of you. The first one is, did you say 3 million hits on your 511 system per year? Is that combining website visits, and are those physical calls to 511?
It's all of that. We upgraded the call system. We have the app, and we also have our 511 website. So it's all of those on a really big year, 3 million we've had.
And then we had a question that kind of applies to everyone, but I'm going to let you take a shot at it first, and then I'm going to ask Rod to answer it next. So the question is, and this is a great question to ask, because we're talking about how to prioritize TSMO projects, and many times that's just within our traffic budgets. But of course, there's the greater budget to the agency, and TSMO has a portion in that as well. And so the question to you, Dawn, is how successful are you in working TSMO into larger projects within your organization?
I think fairly successful. Like I mentioned, we have user groups both in the traffic and in safety engineers. The process in Wisconsin for scoping projects is holistic, so it'll bring the region safety traffic engineers in scoping those large-scale projects as well as the rehabilitation projects. So that's the opportunity to bring those lower cost fixes in. Tying them in with my $10 million ITS program is even a better benefit, because then it really syncs up the technologies and trying to find those lower cost fixes. So I think we've been fairly successful in looking at that overall.
Great. And Rod, I would ask the same question of you. How is it going for Nevada to work it into larger projects?
We're being very successful in the last few years. So one of them that I brought up was our active traffic management. So it was our largest project to date. It was well over $1 billion for a project down in Las Vegas. And so we were able to incorporate that, so we worked through the SE process and that type of thing. But overall, I think, we're getting a better top-down approach, I think, because we have a champion from our director down looking at TSMO and how we can incorporate those into our larger projects. So, in fact, we're looking at, a statewide initiative to start looking at master planning and start looking at how we can incorporate some of these strategies too. So I think we're doing pretty darn good.
Awesome. I'm going to ask Jed if you want to answer it, and then also Jed, when you're done answering, I'm wondering if you'd like to reiterate. I noticed you answered a question in the chat box. That's great. But if you want to expand on that at all, go ahead and kind of re-ask the question and answer it with any expansion, and if you don't want to, that's no problem too. So the first question is, how are you doing working TSMO into larger projects?
I think I would say we've been quite successful as each of those technologies have come on board and been more successful. Probably the end of queue warnings in construction projects that are along busier corridors, setting up rapid tow contracts and some construction contracts to make sure that again those high volume corridors, if there is an incident, that we're able to really take care of those secondary crashes, or at least prevent those secondary crashes where possible. So that's really probably been the largest push. Obviously, continue to look at some of the newer technologies and making them available, just so we can become more visible, or some of the areas that we're looking at, modifying the type of message boards we're using, and some of the things we're working around. Snowplow awareness, understanding what kinds of where are our plows at, and what how can we warn drivers. So that's probably been that success, and we've really there's I think just the process of going through the TSMO strategic planning process really put it in the forefront of a lot of people's minds, and so my hope now is that we're actually in motion. I can keep that same level of enthusiasm moving. As far as the questions that were were asked about, we're talking just about if our funding in Minnesota was TSMO dedicated, and I answered that it was not, that we have to compete along every other solid need that comes out there. There's a limited part amount that is, but the primary, it is just competing with any other activity that may be happening along that project. Now, there will be things that become helpful, especially in a time of a pandemic and all the at-home education. There's not going to be a larger statewide push for broadband expansion, and so in some cases, the work that we're doing in our CABX office now to be prepared for even further fiber expansion will really play off and help in the statewide focus from all the different agencies. So again, sometimes we're working with others outside the transportation industry to help satisfy some of those TSMO pieces.
Perfect.
Hey, Monica.
And yes.
Oh, so this is Tracy, and I was just going to throw out that in addition to how successful in working into larger projects, one thing we've been finding with states is the when is the best time to work it into larger projects. It seems like that can vary sometimes a lot across states, and so I don't know if anyone has had any experience with more success at certain times of the life cycle than others or not, but that seemed to vary more than I might have expected between states. If anyone had any comment on that, that might be also interesting to hear.
Yeah, if I was going to cue it up for Kelly, she can be thinking about it, but if Jed, Rod, or Dawn wanted to supplement their answers with Tracy's added dimension.
Well, this is Jed in Minnesota. Certainly, one of the when questions for us is when we were doing our ITS expansion and providing those grants for ITS type work. With the feedback we got from the districts was to provide things 5 years out in advance. So when they do their 4-year plan that gets approved by the regional group, it just makes it easier for them to have a solid scope in that project. But then again, 5 years out for some of these new and active technologies, that almost gets to be too far away. So we're trying to find ways to leverage both late spending as well as providing early notification.
And this is Don. Again, most of our success has been with the scoping process up front. It is a 6-year out type program. 3-year out should be pretty solid. So most of that, if the safety engineers, traffic engineers are tied in with that, that's when a lot of the expectations, like our Beltline project in Madison, we're going to be doing hard shoulder running. I don't think that would have been conceptualized. They would have looked at a completely rehabilitation project had it not been for let's look at hard shoulder running. So, and that was a great example of looking out far enough that you can incorporate those strategies.
And this is Rob.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. So similar to both, Jed and Don, early on, we try to get it in the scoping process as well. So, currently we've been doing our strategic deployment plans internally for like a 3-year planning process, but as part of the evaluation tools we're doing it, we're going to start doing it into the 5-year plan.
Perfect. And I think what comes to my mind is I've seen a chart somewhere that it's the ability to influence a project versus time, right? And this is not just regarding TSMO, but just the scope in general, right? The further we get into the project, the less influence we can have. And so certainly for TSMO, that definitely applies. And so Kelly, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to answer the question. And then if you wanted to reiterate anything that you answered in the chat box with a little expansion, feel free to.
Sure, yeah. I mean, so similarly, right, we're looking at our 6-year process with this update to the long-range plan and with the idea that the long-range plan is going to start influencing that project selection. That's kind of where we're trying to get in at the forefront. We'll see how successful that is. Like I said before, though, for projects that are already further along in the planning and design process, because we're such a small agency, we've really been able to kind of just build on personal relationships to get in what we need to get in from a, mostly at this point, an ITS perspective. And And we also have, like one of our policies that we have right now is anytime there's an impact to our signal system, to the conduits, the communication conduits, that we will install fiber runs. So we've got like a big project to do, a big fiber backbone, but this is how can we kind of incrementally build up our fiber network. So we're trying to come at it from a few different perspectives to varying levels of success. And I don't really have anything to add with what I wrote in the chat box. So.
Perfect. Just wanted to give you guys an opportunity if there was more. So here's where the cage match starts. We just have a general question, free for all. So it's whoever can ring their buzzer first and loudest gets to answer it first. But there's a general question to all of you. How do you convince your colleagues who were satisfied in the ad hoc ways of doing business or thought that TSMO was an additional thing they had to do in the importance of TSMO? Anyone want to ring in on that one?
This is Don. Again, most of my strategy that we've been doing is tie it up in their normal process that they have. If I can demonstrate that there's a quicker, better, safer, cheaper way of doing it, our current themology, it meshes well with. So that and tying it to the business need that they can see has been probably the biggest success I've had.
And this is Rod. I would echo that too. It's the business case. So we have a championship team, as part of our core group, and what we're trying to do is establish that business case for each of those areas so that they get, a better understanding of how that will help focus for them as well.
Yeah, and this is Kelly, and I would just ditto all of that, and I would also add that a lot of times we don't even call it, when I'm talking to colleagues, I don't call it TSMO, just stick with kind of operations, but as long as we're making the business case for something that is TSMO, then that's, not to bog them down in terminology.
Hi, this is Tracy. One thing we produced in the last year and a half were a series of fact sheets looking at TSMO in design, TSMO in construction, TSMO in safety, etc. We did a set of 9, and part of what spawned that was how to have those kind of conversations to help convince some of those colleagues and that influence projects at different points of the way, how TSMO could help them. Yes, they could help TSMO by considering TSMO, but in different ways, but TSMO could also help them. So trying to look at the shoe on the other foot and what might resonate to help them do their job as well seems to be one of the angles that, makes some inroads anyway to developing those relationships that, can be built on for this purpose.
I love it. It sounds like sales. You guys are all scientists and engineers, and but you're talking sales. And I didn't hear one of you use the word indoctrination, so good job. I know Brad has got some questions to tag on to this, so I'm going to turn it over to Brad and see what kind of questions he wants to offer up.
Yeah, thanks, Monica. So I heard both Jed and Rod talk about coordination with the districts. I'd like to ask, in that prioritization process, like when you were ranking, I know Jed, you talked about the 34 action items that you prioritized. Was that this is questions both for Jed and Rod. Working with your districts, was that more of a cooperative, shared way of consensus of coming up with those final rankings of how you prioritize those items, or was it driven more by, at a headquarters level or not a district level?
Well, Brad, I would say the process was done individually in each of the districts, and then it was the scaling, the weighting was brought together afterwards. It really allowed each of the districts to, describe kind of what their greatest interests were at, and it almost becomes as helpful for me, knowing that maybe get a couple of different districts were maybe far more interested in XYZ technology, And so when I'm looking for champions or looking for interest or an issue that they want to have resolved, that background information is almost as important as the peer ranking of the 34 items. Because frankly, it's, you know, whether it's 1 to 34, it's great. It's a great start, but really things can jump around quickly as opportunities arise. So the best part, I think, was just simply the process that Ray Starr and the rest of the group that put this together was, it was very inclusive in the conversation and saying what would be helpful here. And I think that was the huge benefit of it.
And this is Rod. So Brad, yeah, ours is very similar in nature too. So we met with each of our districts, we gathered their needs, we kind of put it through that prioritization process, and it was a total collaborative effort, you know. So we wanted to make sure that it was fully transparent as we do this and they understand. We also took into account, you know, their needs, you know what I mean, specific to their district, to make sure that we weren't being, you know, just subjective from the headquarters standpoint.
Great. I have one follow-up question, and maybe this is for everyone, in addition to Jed and Rod. So, using in your prioritization process, using other beyond the qualitative, what other quantitative methods do you use, like looking at system performance, looking at travel time reliability, et cetera? What other more quantitative measures did you deploy?
This be Rod. I mean, cost is one of them, you know, obviously. So when we looked at that, we did take into account, you know, thresholds for cost. And I don't remember exactly what those thresholds were, but that would be part of the project delivery, you know, to help, you know, for that prioritization. So once it gets to, you know, above, you know, $1 million, $2 million, that type of thing, obviously it's going to be a little bit more cost prohibitive, you know. So the lower the cost, you know, the better the scoring versus the higher cost implementations.
Okay, anyone else like to say what they used as far as quantitative, looking at performance of the system when you developed your prioritization?
This is Kelly. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, you know, when we started the vetting process, the idea was that we would have an official scoring system that was, you know, based quantitative, but we've actually gone towards just looking at a lot of qualitative measures because it seems like at this time it's just there are too many variables and it's too hard to, you know, bog it down into specific things that it's just better to talk through it and have principles than it is to have specific performance measures at this point.
And this is Don. Again, for some of the larger scale TSMO, we'll look at bottlenecks that we have, operational throughput, delay reliability. So some of that we'll go through for the ITS, more smaller scale stuff. A lot of that will be signals and meeting signal warrants type aspects.
The small piece that I would add, this is Jed, is similar to what Kelly was speaking about. One of the things that was done was helpful for those that were part of that pool selecting those 34 items or 34 implementation strategies was a general understanding of ROI for many of those types of activities based on previous projects, but not getting very specific to having a specific qualitative or quantitative on the specific strategy themselves as it looked across the other ones, because we felt that discussion that Kelly talked about was as effective, at least of identifying which directions we should head. Certainly when it comes down to competing against some other attribute you're going to do on a project, you'll get down to some of the more specific data required in order to support those investments.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Tracy. What outreach methods, you know, information collection methods are going to be used with the FHWA research or FHWA project that's currently in process?
Sure, Brad. A couple of things that we are planning to do for that, we're just kind of getting started, are one, certainly a look at some of the resources that we do know are available. So that'd be one kind of piece just to figure out what is out there and maybe how well is it meeting, certain needs and maybe not other needs. So we'll look at that. Another one is we do plan to have some listening sessions, virtual listening sessions, to talk to what we think are probably some segments of the user population. So it could be that we, maybe look at the state level, who might be the most likely users at the state level, and perhaps segment that into a couple of different categories that might make sense for the sake of discussion. Like it could be operations staff might be one grouping, and maybe planning and project development and engineering staff, maybe that's another grouping. So we're having that kind of discussion now. And then maybe looking a little bit at the regional transportation planners and folks at MPOs who might be responsible for doing, some of the upfront needs assessment and, identifying some of those projects for the long-range plans, as a few of the panel members have mentioned. So that may be another group that we talk to, possibly some local transportation agencies as well. Those are some of the we're kind of looking at what might make sense from a segmentation perspective for having some of those, some listening sessions. I think one other aspect is certainly talking to the CTSO Operations Strategies subcommittee that is looking at a range of various strategies that would fall within that subcommittee, and getting some input there, and for, including some folks in listening sessions from there. And then the other aspect too is we're keeping in mind we do have a couple of folks on the team for the project that are involved with the operations manual that's being developed now, being led by CTSO and TRB. To develop that through the NCHRP project. So certainly keeping that in mind, there are some discussions that have already been had over there that might be helpful as well. So that's kind of the initial thinking in that area as we embark on that task.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. So I'm seeing a question in the chat box, and I'm not sure if you covered it yet, Monica. It was the one on how successful is everyone in working TSMO into larger projects. Have we covered that one?
We did. Yep.
Sorry, I got disconnected for a minute. Sorry.
They all answered. They all got A's on it.
All right. All right. I guess here's another one in the chat box. Are any TSMO programs facing funding challenges as a result of the pandemic, and how are you preparing to overcome those challenges? That's a good question. Timely question for everybody.
This is Don. Yes, we, like a lot of folks, if your VMTs are down, you don't have your funding source coming in. Our funding, even though it is a SEG funding, it still will have a reduction because it's heavily based on that. We've gone through a prioritization. We took an estimate on where we think the projections are going to show us. We did delay projects. We didn't cut them out, but we did reprioritize and delay projects for implementation. So as far as my $10 million program, I think I pushed about $1 million worth out in an hour year.
Thanks, Don. Anyone else want to comment on that one?
In Minnesota, certainly. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's fine. Go.
Yeah, in both, we've had some of the same delays in Minnesota. Also with the operational budget that I get most flexible in terms of discretion. I've had several activities put on hold until things play out. So we may have to move a couple of initiatives into the following year, but what happens in a pandemic?
For the state of Nevada, I think the biggest thing that we've been challenged with as far as the pandemic is just more the hiring of, staff, so as far as projects and delivery, somewhat, a little bit, delayed on a few, but for the most part, we're still, making those project deliveries and so forth. So it's really more, I think, staffing. We've had to go through a hiring freeze, and we're slowly but surely, getting back up. We're, I think, about 400 short currently right now, but we're working through that.
And in DC, I mean, most of our TSMO activities are federally funded, so currently we're doing okay. And likewise on the staffing front, operations is considered pretty critical right now. So we've been able to, despite a budget freeze, push through some new positions. So we're okay for now, but that's this year. We'll see what happens next year.
Thanks, Kelly. Monica, do you want to comment on that from WashDOT's perspective?
I'm sorry, my call went out for a second. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, we were asking a question in the chat boxes about TSMO program funding challenges as a result of the pandemic, and has TSMO in your state been impacted by that those funding challenges?
Yeah, we certainly have. I can't even remember what the final numbers just from the first 3 months were that were a hit to our overall budget, but we're also finding that the revenues are not back to where they were, so it's an ongoing issue to our revenue forecast. We also had an added challenge of an initiative that was passed a couple months before the pandemic that also, so we're reeling in several directions and trying to figure out, the good news out of all of this is that our agency, to respond to it, we're looking to make cuts to the capital programs first. And so I take that while you sympathize and you're like all looking around going, this stinks, this isn't great. There's a small little TSMO voice in me that's like, we're making changes. They're not looking to cut operations or maintenance first or preservation. They're looking to reduce our infrastructure spending first and maintain the other things. So little wins, but still not great. So.
Right, Brad, that's a good point. Go ahead.
Brad, this is Don. I should have mentioned, though, we did take advantage of the COVID. We found a lot of our corridors had very low ADT, so projects that we normally wouldn't have done any normal maintenance to because of the volumes on there that it would have caused for a lot of costly TMPs, we jumped on those early. So we actually got to accelerate some maintenance projects and some improvement projects because of the lower VMTs.
Yep, that's a good point, Don. Yeah, we were able to do that in Tennessee too, be able to take advantage of some of the VMT decreases for some resurfacing projects and some pushing forward some other larger construction projects. Great point. And just following on with what Monica said about some of the advantages, as an agency, we've been working more from home, obviously, during the pandemic, but also, travel demand management is really excelling, and people really being more receptive to work from home status, and more businesses that would probably not have been as open before in the past. They're becoming more open to it by necessity, and I think that's going to have a positive impact after the pandemic as well overall. But really good point. One last question I had, and maybe it helps segue us into our next webinar on training, is really as far as the prioritization process. What kind of staff training or staff outreach have you had to do through this process? Have you had to provide any type of workshops or any type of like a regional operations forum or any type of exposure to staff within your DOT, even in a build-up to this prioritization process? And that's for everybody.
Yeah, this is Rod Schilling. I mean, we haven't had any formal training thus far, especially since we just officially put forward our program plan, back in May. But earlier on, I mean, we've done more internally as far as our own investment prioritization tools. So it's, we have a staff of 3. We're actually down to 2 right now. So that handles our TSMO program within traffic ops. So, they're pretty well tapped, so they've been doing most of the training, working with like our scoping section and that type of thing. But, as we move forward, we're going to have a little bit more of a formal program, as far as the training.
Thanks, Rob. Any others want to?
Yeah, it's Jed in Minnesota. I think just, the process that we went through of getting broad buy-in or broad conversation around the development of our plans was an excellent training opportunity for those that were not as closely connected to TSMO type activities. It really helps them kind of put some eyes and understanding to those. And then the documents that Tracy talked about earlier on how TSMO relates to different functional areas, I found as a great resource as we're trying to figure out how we're going to do that next level of training of the next group of project managers, next group of young traffic engineers, maintenance engineers, how we're going to be able to reach out to them in the future. So that will be a core part of what we're doing next.
And this is Don. Formal training, probably not, but we take advantage of the user groups that we have that we can talk about the scoping strategies. The other plug I'll put in here is peer exchanges. We have every year what we call UMTROSIS, I think we're calling it UMPETE now, where we bring the various Mid-America states together, and that's the users, the traffic engineers, the work zone engineers, the electricians, and that's where a lot of idea exchange comes to be, and that helps shape and mold a lot of the scopes we do, I know.
Thank you. Any thoughts on that, Kelly?
I mean, from the pilot perspective, we did a couple of sessions with leadership just to get their buy-in, but then on an ongoing basis, the few people who kind of built this up are the ones who always get contacted to help support emerging technology things too. So, basically anytime someone reaches out to us is an opportunity for us to plug the process and why it's worth investing in. But that's pretty informal. But we don't really have any specific plans for training at this point, formal training at least.
Okay, thank you. So we do have one question that popped up in the chat box. Have you been able to collaborate with your safety program to leverage strategies for TSMO and safety? And that's open to everyone. So the Highway Strategic Safety Plan and 8-SIP monies, you've been able to leverage those.
This is Rod Schilling. So yeah, we work closely with our safety division, and I specifically with our TIM program and so forth, and the Freeway Service Patrol. Yeah, we absolutely leverage those through our traffic operations in our TSMO program. In fact, we kind of build on them a little bit as well too. So we're looking at other strategies like the heavy tows and those types of things to be incorporated.
Thanks, Rob. Any other thoughts on that one? Okay. Well, Monica, I don't think we have any more questions. We don't need. We had scheduled this to last till 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock Eastern. So if we don't have any other questions, we can talk about final words, final comments that people might want to throw out there before we wrap it up.
Oh, you didn't want to sit around and have us all just stare at each other for the last 15 minutes awkwardly? Perfect. Either that or we could do the team cheer you prepared, Brad. I know you like to finish meetings that way too. But no, yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I think at times, you mentioned this at the beginning, Brad, and the importance of NOCoE and FHWA bringing us together. It's like you know, it's a little bit like going to church. During the week, you're having all your struggles, and you come together on Sunday, and you get to celebrate the wins. And, you know, during the week when we're struggling and feeling like we're not moving the needle, it is great to have fellowship like this where we see the needle being moved in other states, and it gives us inspiration both in terms of positivity, but also the tools. And so I just want to say on this specific topic, it is something we at WashDOT struggle with on a day-to-day basis, and I love seeing that there's progress, and it gives me inspiration. And so I want to thank all the presenters for putting themselves out there today and sharing their stories.
Great, thanks, Monica. Yeah, just second that. Thank you to all our presenters. Thank you for being those who have called in. We've had upwards of 60 attendees today, so great participation. Thank you very much for being on the call and for your engagement. Thank you from AASHTO and the National Operations Center of Excellence. We really appreciate it. So this session, as a follow-up, will be available. You can go out there and listen to it if you want to listen back, and also the presentations will be available as well. So, Nilo, do you have anything to add before we close out today?
No, I didn't know like there was just one question pop up. I don't know if you wanted to sort of make an exception and cover that.
So I see a question from signal maintenance plans. That's a good question. Anyone have any comments on that? Last question.
Maybe from Nevada's perspective, I don't know about all the other agencies, but you know, for our signals, we don't operate or maintain any of them within our state, so we have, you know, maintenance agreements in place. So the only thing that we've done as far as advancing anything related to that is trying to develop a master signal agreement, so that way it's not, you know, individual to each of the signal intersections with those jurisdictions. But I'd say maybe that's one thing that we're doing is, you know, doing a master agreement.
Thanks, Rod. Don or Jed?
Yeah, this is Don. As far as maintenance, our asset management plan, we do identify the life cycle and upgrades needed for the different signal systems that are on the state trunk system that we maintain. There are connecting highway signals that we partner with, but we don't participate with maintenance on. They're only upgrades or rehabilitation for.
Okay. Thanks, Don. Okay. Well, we appreciate all the questions in the chat box. It's been really good. We hadn't had a lot of dead air. We've had a lot of great questions. So thank everyone for your time today, and we'll go ahead and call it a wrap. Y'all have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.